Silly butts, we back. Let's get it.
The sicarios of the Mexican cartels fear very few things. They kidnap, kill, and torture with no regard for human life. But there is one man they fear. Eric Morales Guevara, aka El Marino Loco. In the 2010s, El Marino Loco's name went viral after his unorthodox methods of capturing sicarios came to light. What made him so feared among the cartels? And are his methods truly unorthodox in a world whose only language is extreme violence? Let's dive in. The narcotics trade doesn't just supply people with self-destructing substances. It ravages cities and puts people's lives at constant risk.
We drop your bombs from drones, and we have the military right here, but it doesn't seem like they're interested in stopping the other guys from dropping all those bombs.
They're dropping drone bombs just over there?
That just happened today. They dropped like 5 bombs today.
They dropped 5 bombs?
Across the river.
Sometimes entire cities are reduced to ashes, and families are forced to find a new life for themselves if they survive the massacre.
De un año para acá, ¿cómo
They setting whole cities on fire, y'all.
Las casas.
They not playing down there.
Todas están balaceadas. Antes aquí es donde estaban los Jaliscos. Esto era la barricada de ellos.
At the top of the cartel game are people with immense lust for power and money. They'll do anything to stay at the top, and the ones who want to climb the ranks are thrown into the same game. You can only kill your way to the top. It's a very violent game where anyone can die. Sicarios, commanders, authorities, civilians, and the families of anyone who crosses a violent kingpin. So sometimes the authorities begin to speak the Sicario's language. Enter El Marino Loco. Eric Morales Guevara grew up in northern Mexican town that was repeatedly tormented and humiliated by warring cartels. Many vulnerable teens in such towns end up working for said cartels. But Eric was brave enough to say no. In fact, he went straight to the other end of the spectrum. He swore that he would dedicate his whole life to capturing narcos, beating them and humiliating them just like they did with so many innocent people.
He a real-life vigilante.
He didn't just target low-ranking street sicarios and enforcers. He went for the top dogs too, and anyone he could get his hands on. In his eyes, anyone involved in the drug business was a disease that needed to be exterminated to save Mexico and its traumatized people. The cartel Eric targeted with the most determination was the Gulf Cartel, which had been the most responsible for ravaging his hometown. Today,
he wanted to smoke with them.
As notorious
he wanted to smoke with them.
The Sinaloa or Jalisco New Generation cartels, but back in the day, it had a monopoly on Mexico's drug smuggling. Its beginnings go all the way back to 1984, when Juan Garcia Abrego took over his uncle's heroin and weed industry. Abrego was crafty enough to make a deal with the Colombian Cali cartel, led by the Rodriguez Orjuela brothers. He would handle white powder shipments over the Mexican border. This was a much riskier business than what he and his uncle were doing before, but the reward was much, much bigger. Abrego would get half the Cali cartel's earnings just by smuggling their drugs all the way to the U.S. This put the Gulf Cartel at the very top of the cartel pyramid in Mexico. And to maintain their power, they became increasingly violent. But over the last decades, the Gulf Cartel decreased in size and earnings dramatically, and it's partially due to El Marino Loco. As early as 2006, Eric's name came up when some Navy officials commented his methods were unorthodox. However, by then, Eric and his team had already conducted several arrests and huge seizures of weapons and narcotics from the Gulf Cartel. By the 2010s, Eric was known as El Marino Loco, the Crazy Marine, El Martillo, or Mr. Thor, thanks to the little hammer he carried everywhere with him. Well, it wasn't a hammer. It was
gotta be some out of a movie.
Normally used to make schnitzels. But El Marino Loco didn't use it for schnitzels. The tenderizer was his weapon of choice if narcos resisted arrest. As word of Mr. Thor spread out, fewer and fewer sicarios put up a fight when they were arrested by his team. El Marino Loco conducted several raids, some of which made his name viral among cartel members and civilians alike. Most of his raids were conducted in the Tamaulipas and Nuevo Leon regions. In 2015, El Marino Loco was dispatched to arrest Julian Loaiza Salina, aka Comandante Toro. Comandante Toro was a regional Gulf Cartel boss in Tamaulipas, and his arrest would be a breakthrough for the Mexican authorities. But just before El Marino Loco could arrest him, he was abruptly transferred to the town of Tampico. The transfer was suspicious. definitely wasn't in the interest of the authorities. But you know how Mexican cartels are also famous for bribing the police and high-ranking politicians, ensuring they stay untouchable? It can be argued that
People
that's
can be
what
bought,
happened
baby.
that day. However, El Marino Loco didn't care about orders from above that much. So he led a brutal campaign against Comandante Toro anyway. He blocked most of his operations, arrested several of his sicarios, and seized whatever illegal substances he could seize. Needless to say, Comandante Toro was angry. In the cartel world, when you're angry with someone, you don't stop until they're dead, or until you're
big
dead.
fact.
Comandante Toro
Yeah.
became increasingly reckless, engaging in violent shootouts with the Mexican army. In the early morning
the
of April
army?
22nd, 2017, Comandante Toro was killed in a gunfight with the Mexican army in Tamaulipas. However, before dying, Comandante Toro put a bounty of 2 million pesos on El Marino Loco's head. Meanwhile, El Marino Loco was operating from Tampico, and his raids got ever more aggressive. One of his most famous raids was the arrest of Silvestre Jaro Rodriguez, aka El Chive. At the time, El Chive was the leader of the Gulf Cartel in Tampico. El Marino Loco broke into El Chive's home, arrested him, beat him up, took his father's ashes, and destroyed photos of his dad from his home. On this photo of El Chive's father, El Marino Loco wrote a note, proudly announcing that he stole his ashes. This was the utmost humiliation for a cartel kingpin. And here's the thing,
Humiliation,
drug lords don't expect
disrespectful.
anyone to cross them like this. They believe everyone fears them, so no one
He
would dare
treated the
to
cartel
humiliate
like
them in this way.
they was
El
some
Chive
little
was simply
kids.
shocked that anyone would do such a thing, and even leave a note incriminating themselves. News of El Chive's arrest made headlines fast, along with the photos of the many weapons El Marino Loco had confiscated from his home. But El Chive was still alive. Angered and humiliated, he ordered a hit on El Marino Loco, promising 3 million pesos to anyone who brought him his head.
That boy got 5
Another
million in
time,
it.
El Marino Loco raided one of the houses belonging to El Mamido, another Gulf Cartel member. When he captured El Mamido, he had put him on sexy women's lingerie after punching him in the face and swelling his eye. Then he had El Mamido kiss his sicarios. All the while, he laughed at them and took photos of them. Of course, there are several problems with this. Men dressing up as women is not an issue and should not be viewed as emasculating or humiliating. Nor
He
should
made
men
the
kissing
boss
other men be viewed
kiss
this way. Sadly,
all
though, the world
his,
of Mexican cartels has a pretty toxic view of masculinity.
workers? I don't know.
In their eyes, men should be brutal beasts, violent, emotionless, and extremely rigid when it comes to their gender and orientation. So when El Marino Loco treated El Mamido this way, he was only speaking their language. He made the sicarios do what he knew they would hate the most. Then, of course, there's the issue of photographing people while you're laughing at them and making them do horrible things. Over the last 2 decades, this has become a standard torture method for cartels. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel in particular has become famous for filming the brutal torture of their rivals, posting these horrible videos online. It's their way of spreading their message. Everyone should fear the CJNG. No one messes with them, and this is what happens if they do. It's safe to say the Gulf Cartel employs similar
They got it
methods.
from the
So when
Marine.
El Marino Loco did this to its men, he was once again speaking their nasty language.
Oh, no, they was
He
doing it before
announced
him.
his operations through social networks, but he also hunted with extreme violence hitmen and ringleaders whom he exhibited in battered men and dressed in women's underwear. In addition to dressing them in lingerie, Morales Guevara liked to make fun of his prisoners in photos and videos, which earned him the hatred of dozens of drug traffickers who even offered large sums for his head.
To this day, there are 5 million pesos reward on El Marino Loco's head.
5
On El
mil.
Marino's property, El Marino Loco also found a shocking amount of arsenal and military weaponry hidden in buried barrels. This was prized Gulf Cartel property. For El Marino Loco, this was the best reward he could get. The Gulf Cartel was responsible for the most damage his hometown had suffered. Destroying their cartel boss one at a time was his biggest dream. But El Marino Loco's dream would soon crumble. By the late 2010s, El Marino Loco was a viral figure on the internet, a crazy Marine who stopped at nothing to capture the Gulf Cartel members and humiliate them on camera. There were stories of drug lords putting on lingerie and makeup and making out with their hitmen for the Marines' pleasure. For the sicarios, this was worse punishment than prison. Prison happens to a lot of sicarios. It's a risk they assume when they join the illicit work, but this kind of humiliation is only okay in their eyes when administered to their enemies. It wasn't long until the Gulf Cartel decided to retaliate. They publicly accused El Marino Loco of corruption, stealing their weapons, stealing El Chive's father's precious ashes, and accepting bribes. They didn't do so with a shy comment. They put up banners containing all this information all around Tampulas. And well, this didn't sit well with the Mexican Navy, especially with the top-ranking officers who were getting paid by the cartel. Unfortunately, there are several high-ranking officials who are in cahoots with the cartels for monetary reasons. This means that the cartels are protected by the authorities themselves. After news of El Marino Loco's crazy methods was made public by the Gulf Cartel, the Mexican Navy decided to let him go, or at least send him elsewhere where he couldn't hurt the Gulf Cartel anymore. But just as this was happening, both El Chive and his brother, Marco Antonio Rodriguez, were arrested. It's safe to say El Marino Loco had a big part to play in this. El Marino Loco was involved in a myriad of arrests and seizures of cash, weapons, and drugs. During his time with the Mexican army, he reduced the Gulf Cartel to small potatoes in the northern Mexican region. That's no small feat for just one man.
Why you put the potatoes on the video, bro?
His aggression and violence towards sicarios are even more shocking. Today, the 5 million peso bounty on his head still stands, but it's likely no one knows where El Marino Loco is. Mexican officials did not say what El Marino Loco is up to these days, but they did hint at it. Reportedly, he's in southwestern Mexico, targeting other cartel members, but employing just the same methods, dressing them in sexy lingerie and humiliating them on camera for the delight of people who have had enough of brutal sicarios terrorizing their towns. Other rumors suggest that El Marino Loco has since retired or has even been fired from the Navy for corruption. Then there are perhaps the most exciting rumors. Some witnesses stated that Eric Morales formed his own anti-drug group, operating in hiding. Well, not the military, but El Marino Loco in particular. Cross-dressing sicarios is El Marino Loco's passion. He might never fully retire as long as there are cartel members to catch. Thanks for watching. What do you think about El Marino Loco? Are his methods acceptable in the cartel world? Or should the army respect the rules and order, no matter the people they're dealing with? Let me know your thoughts in a comment. And before you go, make sure to like, subscribe, and click that bell button.
You heard what he said, silly butt? Like, subscribe, man. Go ahead. Go check out my boy, Toro. Hey, he drops mad good content, boy. He giving you information about the cartels all day, every day. But look, though, if you ain't did it yet, let's hit the subscribe button and like the video. It's your boy, DtaeNoDinero, man. I gotta get to the next video, so you know what I'm about to say. We out. Silly butt. She the only one that said she was gonna smash me, too. Pick up the phone, show me it was real. I'ma pick up the phone. But I would smash. I don't know what you got going on up here, though. So I don't know what you hiding under there. But I mean, I'm still a smash.